So the following is an interview that I did with my friend Paul, who I met a few months ago. Paul runs a staffing company for contractors in the construction industry. So he does recruiting. And his ability to get results for his clients, who are contractors, construction companies who need employees, his ability to get them results has greatly improved with the recent advances in AI and technology. And so Paul asked me to do go on his podcast recently, and we chatted. And while we were chatting, I really liked his process for finding and recruiting good people. I was really impressed with his retention rate. He boasts something like a 95% retention rate with the employees that he recruits for his clients' companies. And his process is heavily augmented with personality testing and workplace testing and making sure beforehand that people are the right type of person for the job before they're ever interviewed or anything. And so I've been sending people to him for the last couple months, and I'm excited to see how it goes. In this podcast, Paul shares some of his philosophies on recruiting, some of his methods. So maybe it's something you can take and implement yourself. Or if you're interested in speaking to him and his team about recruiting for your construction business, there'll be a link in the description below, and I'll figure out how to connect you with him. So without any further ado, let's see what Paul has to say about recruiting for the construction industry. So yeah, Paul, you and I connected a couple months ago. You are in the staffing business for contractors.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a pertinent issue in the industry and all blue collar industries right now. It's the hardest thing I hear people dealing with is finding and keeping good employees. And that seems to be the problem that you've solved. So why don't you give us a little introduction, your background, who you are, why you're here, and then we'll flow right into it.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate that, Chuck. Background, I've been in the industry for about 40 years. Makes a little guy. I've worked with like a couple thousand contractors over that time. And I was really good at getting clients from 2 to 10 million, did that a lot. And then I got 4 or 5 years ago, the problem was I could grow companies, but it didn't do them any good because they couldn't find the employees, right? So I said, fine. So my first thought was, well, what I'm going to do is do some research, find the best, applicant tracking systems, the best assessment, just best practices, and give it to my clients and let them do it themselves. They totally screwed it up. Didn't have time to do it. I said, fine. So I literally started with a guy in my garage, and now we have about 30 people on staff. We go through 2,000 or 3,000 resumes a week, maybe more than that. And I think we've hired over 1,000 people. We had to go through 280,000 resumes to find them. So you do the numbers, it takes about 200 to 300 resumes to find a guy. But we've been lucky, or, I think I can give some myths why we've been able to do it and other people aren't. We've got a 95% chance of people staying.
That's pretty high.
Out of the 500 people we hired last year, only 17 didn't work out. And industry average is more around 50%. So the question would be, why do we have 95% and the industry has 50%? And I can probably explain why. I think that's what this is about.
Okay.
So first, there's some myths. I call it the myths of Frank. These are what I call them myths. These are what contractors believe that stop them from finding good people. And I will contend it's not the market. It's not an easy market, but it's sort of like marketing. It's like somebody saying, well, I can't find any good clients. What's your marketing budget? I don't have a marketing budget, right? Or I can't find any good employees. What's your recruiting budget? I don't have a recruiting budget. So most contractors have I'll have my friends my clients, my employees' friends work for me. I'm going to answer the phone and do a good job, and I'm done. And that isn't going to work too well anymore. And I think something's really happening, guys, which is going to be a big difference. And this I see happening in the industry. And it has to do with AI, but not maybe what you think. AI is changing the landscape of industry and the whole economy, right? Would you agree? It's changing everything.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
But what's happening is, what industries can AI disrupt? Attorneys, doctors, anything where people are selling information for money, right? AI is just disrupting that industry terribly. AI can't put on a roof, can't build a house, right? So the construction industry, which used to be a hugely fractionalized industry, like millions of little contractors running out there, is, I think, going through a transformation. And I'm going to predict over the next 5 to 6 years, I've seen millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of capital come into the construction industry I've never seen before. Because all this money is finding a place where they can put it and it won't go away with AI, right? So I've seen people buy up roofing companies, plumbing companies, construction companies like crazy because they realize, well, that's a good place to put capital where it's not going to get screwed up by AI, right? It's not going to disrupt it. So I predict in the next 4 to 5 years, what's going to happen is instead of having 30 roofing contractors, you're going to have 3. They're owned by big companies. Instead of having 50 you're going to have 10. It's sort of like, what happened to retail with Walmart, right? They had better distribution systems, better marketing systems, better recruiting systems, and they just killed the small independent retailer, right? For better or worse, it's what happened. Well, I can see that same thing happening in construction right now, where, the small guy who doesn't know how to market, doesn't know how to recruit, doesn't have the skills that the bigger industries have, is going to be either put out of business or bought by a franchise or bought by somebody like that. So that's why this is so critical at this time, because you're going to have to get better at marketing and better at recruiting, because if you're not, they're going to put you out of business or buy you, like the choices, right? And I'll use the example for Walmart. Everybody says these retailers, I can't find anybody. There's nobody that wants to work. I can't find anybody. And all the retailers in town are complaining that they just can't find employees, right? Walmart moves outside. Somehow they come with 450 people out of nowhere. Where do they come from, right? That's because Walmart was better at recruiting than they were, right? And so I see this as a critical time for the construction industry to get on board with good recruiting practices, good marketing practices, because you want to be either competitive or be the guy that gets bought out, not the guy that's put out of business. Does that make sense? I'll give an example. I had a guy, a new client. He has like 10, 15 million bucks. And what does he do with it? He starts a roofing company in Nebraska. Why? He goes, well, I know more about marketing. The roofers in Nebraska, they're young guys that don't know what they're doing, or old guys who are going to retire and don't get it. I'm going to come in with good recruiting techniques, good marketing techniques, and I can own the roofing in, this 3 towns in Nebraska in 4 years. So I think it's a critical time for the construction industry. Because if you don't get on board and get your recruiting together and your marketing together, I think you're going to see competition like you've never seen before.
Interesting.
Okay. So I'm going to put that as an introduction to 6 myths, because this is what's going to get in the way of you doing good hiring, right? Okay. The first myth is only recruit when you need somebody, right? People think that's what I need to do. When is Starbucks not recruiting? When is Walmart not recruiting? When is any decent retail business not recruiting? They're always recruiting, right? But it's a myth in construction that, I'm going to put an ad in, find my guy, and then I'm done. Not true. All right. So that myth that only recruit when you need people is really getting in your way. Another one is, when they go, well, I only recruit when I need people because I don't have a recruiting budget. Why don't you have a recruiting budget? Well, all I do is ask my friends. I put an ad in Indeed and call people a week later, and whoever shows up, right? Not a good technology. So I think that one, only recruiting you need somebody, definitely gets in the way. You should be recruiting all the time. Never stop recruiting. I had to change my whole financial structure of my business for that reason, because I've been preaching this for 30 years as a coach. Always be recruiting. I started a recruiting company. I lost 187 clients last year, all for the same reason. You guys are awesome. I found my guys in 3 months. I'm done. And I went, no. You should be recruiting all the time. So I literally changed my pricing. It's $3,000 a month at a time, or $15 a month to sign up for a year, because I wanted to make the financial incentives so big that they'd go to annual. That's what I had to do to make them recruit all year. So huge one, recruit all the time. Just don't recruit when you need people. Bad idea. Okay.
So
So what happens if you don't need anybody for 6 months, but you're still recruiting? What are you doing with those people coming in?
What does a sports team do when they have a star? And do they stop, recruiting new sports people, new football players, new baseball players? When do they stop? They never stop, right? Because they're always building the team. So, I talked to a guy the other day. He said the biggest transformation he made in the company was recruiting all the time because he actually built a bench. So when somebody would leave, now it also protects against people doing what I call raised by blackmail. That is, it's not me, it's my wife. I need another $5 an hour. I'm going to have to go work for the guy across the street because, don't blame me. It's just my wife, right? What do? You give the guy the raise. And then what's everybody else here? Oh, to get a raise, what you have to do is threaten the boss with leaving. If you have people on the bench and the guy comes with that and say, great, go find another job, no problem. I've got somebody I want to bring in your place anyway. And he's the same price as you are. It's a supply demand. How do you create supply? How do you create supply in marketing? You advertise, right? You don't just take, one of the big problem contractors have is they just, they don't have a good marketing plan. So they take these clients they shouldn't take on, right? Mm-hmm. And then they become the worst clients. Same thing with recruiting. They don't recruit all the time. So they take some guy they don't need to take on because they're desperate and he's a wrong guy, right? So you create supply by marketing for whether it's for employees or for marketing. Same difference. You got to have a good supply of clients, a good supply of employees. So anyway, recruit all the time. The next myth, employees are expensive. I can't afford it. I've heard the same thing from marketing. Oh my God, I'm supposed to put 5% of my budget into marketing. Are you kidding me? I just answer the phone and do a good job. It doesn't work. Because if you look at look at ROI, rate of return on investment. If you're marketing, if you spend, $1,000 and get $5,000, how often do you want to do that? As much as you can, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you spend $1,500 a month and you get all these great people to work for you, what kind of deal is that, right? It's a very good rate of return on investment because you're only as good as your employees. So, employees are not expensive. They're the best investment you'll have. Now, sometimes people go, well, I can't hire somebody. And I go, why? Well, I can't afford to pay them what what the market value is. I said, look at your own company. If you're not paying market value for employees, you're going to quit and go work someplace else. Because everybody we recruit already has another job or you wouldn't want to hire them. You got to convince them to quit who they're working for and come to work for you. To do that, you got to be competitive. And lots of times we'll start with a company and they're paying their project manager like 80 grand and the market's 95. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not going to get somebody for 80 grand. So you're going to have to bring up your wages to be competitive. You have to bring up your pricing also to make money at that rate. But you can't, just ignore what the market rate is for employees. It's like with the market rate for your product. Your pricing has to be fair and your compensation has to be fair. So employees are not expensive. They're the best investment you're going to make. Third myth, we can do this ourselves. What's the big deal? I put an ad in Indeed, call the guy a week later, take who shows up, and we're good. That's why we have 95% and you have 50, because we just don't do that. Right? I've got a whole system I can explain later, but it's, recruiting. You're probably not good at it. You don't do your own accounting, probably don't do your own marketing. Why would you do your own recruiting? Hire some company that's good at it. Doing it yourself is a bad idea. Whether you use us or somebody else, it's a technology, it's a skill. It isn't something you probably have, and you're no better than your team. So why take the most important thing you're going to do in your company and have you, an amateur, pull it off? Hire, it's not good to do it yourself. Get somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. It's well worth the investment. Next one, recruit within the construction industry. I've heard that a lot. I want somebody with, 5 years experience as a superintendent doing high-end whatever, and they make this so narrow, they're only looking in the industry. It's a bad idea. I'll give you an example. Selections coordinator, right? Or office manager. We've hired some wedding planners that have just killed it. Now think about it. What skills does a wedding planner have? You've got a bunch of, I'm going to call them industries that are not that reliable. You got the band. You got the flower guy or girl. You've got the venue. You've got the caterer. You got all these people that have to show up at the right place at the right time They've all got to deliver, and the client has to be happy, and it has to look great. Sounds like remodel to me.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, that person chose that for a career. They want to be a wedding planner because they have those skills, right? And the good news is the hospitality industry doesn't pay very well. So you can get them fairly inexpensively compared to somebody's construction experience. So when you run an ad, make sure it says, construction experience preferred but not required. Some people could transfer out of commercial into residential. I've had a guy run a hotel chain, can run an office. It's running a business. Mm-hmm. So, recruiting the construction industry, that is a myth. You can hire outside the industry.
That's a great tip.
The next one, hire fast and fire slow. That's the myth. Hire because I need the guy. My project manager just quit. I just got a big project. I'm going to have to hire him fast. I fire slow because I can't find anybody else. Okay. The cost of that is far higher than people can possibly imagine. Let me tell you why. So you spent years building this culture. You've got people working for many years. They're loyal, they're smart, they have high integrity, they don't lie, they don't cheat, they don't steal, they're great people. And you've built this culture over a long period of time, right? Now, you got a project manager leaves. Oh my God. So since you have been recruiting all the time, you hire the first warm body that shows up. You have to, because you got somebody on the project, right? Now, this guy, unfortunately, only lies occasionally, right? Only lies 10% of the time. You never know what 10% is, so you can't trust anything he says. He only steals occasionally, maybe a nail gun here or there. He only pisses off your clients once in a while. So you brought this guy into your culture. Now, what does that do to your culture? It kills it. Because people now see what you're willing to tolerate. And either they'll leave because they don't like it, or they'll take over the same attributes which you don't want. They'll realize, oh, well, he doesn't show up work time, I show up work time. And one bad person in your company can destroy your culture because everybody knows it. They know what you're willing to tolerate. And then that says more about you than them. Does that make sense? So the idea of, hire fast and fire slow is a bad idea. The reality is you should hire slow because you're always recruiting, and fire fast. Now, by fire fast, the rule I have is if everybody left your company, all right, and and then you have to start a new company doing the same thing next door, whatever. Anybody you wouldn't rehire, you should fire. And think about that. Anybody listening to this podcast, just think about the people that work for you. Anybody that you wouldn't rehire, you should fire. And the next one is, when should you fire the person? The minute you think about it. I mean, we all have the guy, the world's worst employee, not bad enough to fire, good enough to keep. They kill an organization. And we know who that guy is. I mean, Roman or Chuck, if you get a call on the phone and go, oh, it's John. You know, right? You're not excited about hearing from John. Every time John calls you, it's an issue 1 out of 5 times, right? Or you get an email from John. Oh, John. That John needs to go. But you haven't got a replacement, so you tolerate John, which also brings your whole culture down, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's really important to keep A players. I was listening to, somebody, I think it was Netflix, the guy with the book on starting Netflix. He says, I only have A players. Another way to look at it, he tells his team, if this person working for you quit, would you fight to keep them? If they, no, I'm okay. If you wouldn't fight to keep the employee, they're the wrong employee. That's how you tell. And people that you wouldn't fight to keep, give a big bonus and let them go. It's way better for your company. Give them 3 weeks severance and say, have a good day. That's how you build a great team. Because you're only as good as your team. One example I use is, what makes Elon Musk one of the richest men on the planet? He's smart. We get that. But his, secret sauce, he can build great teams. That's what allows him to do what he's doing, right? You may love him or hate him, but he can build great teams. That's why he has like 5 companies, because he has great teams. So the ability to build a great team is probably the most important thing you're going to do as a contractor to succeed. Okay? And the last one is recruiting is a project that ends. Unfortunately, contractors have what I call the project mentality. Everything has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end, because they do all that, right? They build a house, they do a roof, anything they're doing, it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. They look at hiring like that's, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So when they look at the world, they see it in that project mentality. They go, oh, I need a project manager. I have a beginning, I put an ad in, have a middle, I hire them, and I'm done. It's like accounting or marketing. You never stop. It is not project mentality, all right? It's process mentality. It is a process. It is not a project. Make sense? So those are the 6 myths. I'll go really quick one more time. Only hiring needs somebody, not true. Hire all the time. Employees are expensive, not true. Employees are the best investment you're going to make. We can do it ourselves, not true. Get somebody to help you. Recruit within the construction industry, not true. Look outside the industry. Hire fast, fire slow. Just the opposite. Hire slow and fire fast. And recruiting is not a project that ends. So those are the 6 myths. Now, if you got a little time, I can go over best recruiting practices that I find that work. Are you up for that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, best recruiting practices. Number 1, the art of the job ad. It is an ad. It is not a job description. It is an ad. When you're advertising your product or service, you want to attract people, right? So write an ad, not a description. Now, how do you write an ad? God bless ChatGPT has made it a lot easier. Put a prompt in that says, I am a remodeling company in Tennessee. I have this many employees. I want to hire a new project manager. I want you to take the assumption that you're a great HR person. You're a fantastic copywriter, an awesome comedian, and you have the skill set to get somebody to quit their other job and come work for me. Write me an ad, right? It's a great start. Now, it's not perfect, but it's way easier than it used to be. So use AI, help you write the ad. It's an ad. This ad has to get somebody to quit their job and come to work for you. Otherwise, it's not a good ad. So make sure you write an awesome ad. Next, where to post the ad? Everywhere. An ad in Indeed doesn't cut it. When we post an ad, it goes on 100 job boards, plus LinkedIn, plus Facebook, plus we search all the databases. Hang a poster in your supplier. Put it everywhere you can possibly put it. There's no such thing as too much exposure. Put it everywhere. All right, that's key. Not just place an ad in Indeed and see what happens. Next one. This is really, really hard, but it's important. Respond in minutes. When somebody applies for a job with us, the minute they hit apply, 1 second later it says, thank you for applying. We got your resume. We're really impressed, blah, 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 right? It's sort of like marketing. If you're selling remodeling or roofing or something, and people are going down, Indeed or Google, they're going to call company after company after company, right? If you can't get a call and call them back a week later, that's not going to work. Well, in marketing for employees, the same thing. They're going through a bunch of ads, right? They're looking at project manager, and when they apply, when the first one back says a lot about the company. If you're applying for 5 companies and nobody responds but one, that gives that one that responds a competitive advantage, right? So respond in real time if you can, which is hard. I mean, as I said, we go through 300 applicants to find a guy and respond all in real time. So we have the software and the people. So the minute somebody applies, you respond. I realize that's hard to do. It's difficult, but it's really important. It's respond in real time. The minute they apply, you should respond. Next, selection process. There's a bunch of assessments out there. We have, I think, the best, but you can get them. There's the ways of determining, is this the right person for the position? And we have a bunch of assessments. The reason we get such a higher 95% is we use all the assessments. We know by the time a person applies, we know, are they have the right personality to the position? They have the integrity they need? Are they honest? Do they have the intelligence? Do they have drive? Do they have initiative? I can test for all that stuff. So get some good assessments. So when a person applies, you'll know they're the right person. And there's enough research out there with a bunch of other stuff. You can find out all about them just by having them fill out an assessment on a computer. Video interviews are key. We do video interviews for anybody. There's some things you can't ask on assessment and even in an application, but you can find out in a video interview. Like we do a lot of stuff when we have bilingual people. We do it in Spanish and English. You can't tell how well they can speak either unless you hear what they say. So the video interview tells you a lot about them, who they are, what their personality is, what they look like, if they're in good shape or not. All the stuff that you probably can't find out any other way, you can find out in a video interview. There's a lot of software that will do. We use it for everybody, but if you can, do a video interview. And there's different companies that will supply software that does that. But make sure you do a video interview. And those questions are specifically geared for that candidate. We do it every time. So we do the assessments, we do video interviews. Next, we do reference checks. We do reference checks on everybody. And that's really important because you never know. And sometimes you get the right answer or wrong answer, but at least do the reference checks. Last, do background checks. They're inexpensive. They're like $100, but nowadays we do background checks on everybody. So if you write the great ad, you post it everywhere, you respond in minutes, you use a lot of assessments to find out the right person, you do video interviews, you do reference checks and background checks, you'll be much more successful at this.
So when you place somebody and you take them through this process of taking all these tests and interviews and checks, when they go into this company, do your clients who are these companies who are hiring these people that you find, do they all take the test too? And
well, we do sometimes try to do it a culture match. Like we'll have some of the people in the company take these same kind of assessments to find out if there's culture match. Now, I'm going to ask you one of the questions we have for honesty. I'm going to ask both of you guys this question, and it's an honesty question. So, Roman and Chuck, I want you to give different answers. Okay, here's the question. Your boss asked you to tell you that the product will be delivered in 2 weeks. Okay, that's what you know. It's 4 weeks. The boss knows it's 4 weeks. You have a choice. You're going to support your boss and say 2 weeks, or you're going to tell the truth and say 4 weeks. Which would you do?
I'll probably tell the boss that we need to tell the client that it's going to be 4 weeks.
I didn't give you that option.
That's still what I would do.
See, those kind of questions get to the core of who you are, right? And that's the kind of stuff that we can find out through assessments, right? Mm-hmm. Some people would say 4 weeks. Some people would say 2 weeks, and some people say maybe 2 to 4 weeks. They try to get around it, right? But, it's interesting because that's the kind of questions you need to ask to find out who these people are. Because and some companies would be fine with saying 2 weeks, and other companies would not be fine with it and say 4 weeks. It depends on the corporate culture, right?
Sure.
So you got to match that corporate culture with the people they're hiring. That's a long answer to your question, but you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So when construction companies hire you to do this, how much time do you spend educating them on this process? Or is that something that just happens as you go along?
Well, it happens as you go along. The biggest problem we have is that we say, call this guy, and they don't call him the same day. They take 3 days. The guys are getting the job. When we do it, you've got a team. You've got a pipeline scanner. They have an assistant. You have a account manager that does all the applicant-facing stuff, and you have an account specialist that does the client-facing stuff. So that's your team, right? Mm-hmm. And so the biggest problem we have sometimes is we go through this whole process, which is not easy, and you get 300 applicants to get the right guy. We finally get the right guy and say, this guy's awesome, call him, and they call him a week later, and he's got another job. So that's probably big. I mean, we do all the work. They don't have to learn about assessment. Now, in doing assessments, we have them take the assessment so they have faith in the instrument, and they get, and every time we go against it, we're in trouble. Every time they say, oh, well, he's my friend's friend, and I know he did terrible on integrity, and he had this and this wrong, but we're going to hire him anyway. I go, don't do it. It's not going to work. And then they hire him, and 4 months later, it doesn't work out. So there's a lot of science which didn't exist before on how to assess people to make sure it's a good fit. And that's what people aren't using.
And that's where your 95% retention rate comes from.
Absolutely.
Were you doing this before you had the tests?
You mean before, as a company?
Yeah,
when I started 4 years ago, I researched the test. This is all existing technology that I put together, sort of a technology stack to make it work, because I knew this is best practices in recruiting, and that's what I put together.
Has your retention rate been 95% for 4 years, or is that something that's gotten better?
As far as we go back, it has been. I mean, we may miss, but we don't miss very often because we do all this stuff. And I think if you're going to do it yourself, if you do all this stuff, you won't miss very often, but it's not easy to call back in real time. It's not easy to do all the assessments. You have to, even learning how to use an assessment, that takes, it's not easy. We have people that have studied a long time to know how to use an assessment, because you've got to interpret it in certain ways, right? And then it takes time to learn how to do that.
So what size company is this a good fit for? Your service?
Mine says anybody over $1 million.
Okay.
Under $1 million, you might have a hard time with $1,500 a month. We've got some people to do it, but I would say anybody over $1 million volume, if we can find everybody you want for $17,000 a year, it's a no-brainer to me. We look up for 5 positions. So if you're 2 guys in a truck, probably not. But anybody over $1 million is fine. And the other says if you're doing 50 million or 100 million, maybe you have your own HR department, right? And you can do all this, and you're doing all best practices already. Now, some companies that are doing like 30 million hire us because we take all the burden off their HR person, right? Because they have a person that's doing it, 10 hours a week, and they haven't got time to do all this stuff. So, but in most cases, most of our clients are between 1 and 20 million. That's pretty much our market. And they have between 3 and 20 employees.
3 and 20. Okay. And what do you recommend for people below that mark that want to get above $1 million?
Well, I would say either invest in something like us or invest in the time and energy to do it right, because you can't grow without employees. It's sort of like a company saying, I can't afford to do marketing. Well, how are you going to get bigger, right? And so it's an investment. So invest in marketing and invest in employees if you want to grow, because otherwise it's going to be really hard.
Are there certain locations or regions where this works better than others?
Well, we're in every market in the U.S. and Canada. Where the 2 times we fail, we do occasionally fail, is if you're in the middle of nowhere, right? We have people in like Canada, there's no town for 700 miles. That's hard, right? So a location can kill you if you're in the middle of nowhere. If you're anywhere near people, we can usually make it work or get people to move. The second one is you're too picky. Too picky. I want somebody with 15 years experience and blah, blah, blah. They're hard to find. You got to be open and train somebody, right? So I would say, don't be too picky. And if you're not in the middle of nowhere, it should work.
Okay. Cool. And what does the process look like getting started? Like if I wanted to work with you today to start helping me find a couple guys for my remodeling company, how do we start and how long will it take before we start getting some good applicants?
Well, what you're going to do is come to me and I'm going to say, well, it's $3,000 a month or $1,500 per year. Hopefully you'll sign up for you. Most of my clients do now. And say, okay, we're going to be looking all the time. You're buying that philosophy. I would say when we can start looking in a week, but it's going to take us a couple months to find the guy on the average. Okay. It's easier to find a project manager than a carpenter. I will tell you. You want to find a carpenter in Portland? Not easy, right? Because we're in every market in the country. We can tell you about how long it's going to take because we're on all these markets. I said, we have 400 or 500 job ads running every day, and we know what that looks like, and we take 3,000 or 4,000 applicants a week, so we know what the market looks like where you are, and we hopefully try to get your expectations appropriate because a lot of these guys have not real expectations because everybody they hire was a friend of a friend, and they hired 2 guys last year because one guy knew some friend and the guy knew a person. They put an ad in Indeed, somebody showed up. And, most contractors just aren't good at recruiting. And so they don't have an experience of what it looks like. And we try to manage your expectations and say, you should be recruiting all the time and it may take 2 to 3 months to find the right guy, but you don't want to settle.
Okay. That's why you always got to be looking because
absolutely
it'll take a while.
Yeah.
Kind of off the topic, but if you were to start a construction company today, somewhere in the United States, what kind of company would you start and where would you do it?
I would start probably a roofing company. And I would probably start it in the Midwest because it's easy to find people with a strong work ethic. In New York and California, they're a little work ethic isn't the easiest, if you know what I mean. So I would start a roofing company in the Midwest. I would dump a bunch of money into marketing. I'd dump a bunch of company into recruiting. and I'd find really good people. I'd lead off with a whole lot of marketing. So I would start with a brand. I'd build a lot of brands so they knew I'm the roofing company in Ohio or wherever, Columbus or someplace, that I'm going to build a brand. I'd pick a market where there was no established brand, like there wasn't the roofing company of Columbus, right? And then I would spend a couple $100,000 making that happen.
Okay. Very cool. And so we're going to link. So your company is Contractor Staffing Source.
Yes.
We're going to put a link to you guys in the description. So anybody watching this or listening to this, the link will be available to you. And you can talk to Paul and his team and see if you can get some kind of stable recruiting together, and stop telling me that finding and keeping good employees is the biggest hurdle in your business.
It's just like, you got to invest, I mean, I don't know what contractors, I remember the old days. I've joined contractors through, technology. When I started, like they, had pagers, right? And before email, before website, and we drug them through technology. And now AI is happening, but AI is going to affect your industry in another way you think. It's going to take a fractionalized industry and consolidate it. So there are people out there, but they're harder to find. And you're going to have to use the best technology you can and invest money in finding people. Because, marketing isn't just answering the phone and doing a good job. And recruiting is just placing an ad in Indeed and you're done. Mm-hmm. And contractors, traditionally, you can get them to buy a tractor. You can't get them to spend money on marketing or recruiting because that's not where their head's at, right? So software. Spending money on soft goods is not only not comfortable for a construction company, but it's sort of like musicians that fought CDs, streaming music. I mean, you're going to lose. So I would say it's an exciting time to be around because now a lot of this technology is available because a lot of new software companies are starting, a lot of project management companies, new marketing companies are starting. So in the past, it used to cost a lot of money to do good marketing, good recruiting, and have good software. And because of the industry now, a lot of that's available. I mean, we're available to recruiting at a fraction of the cost. You got people doing marketing at a fraction of the cost. Project management systems that are killer. So because of all the software and stuff out there, you as a small guy can do way better than you used to be able to do because the costs have been brought way down. Yep.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like the golden age of a lot of these businesses. Yep. And I also see your point about how a lot of companies are going to be bought up and rolled up into big regional companies. I've been thinking about that for a long time as a lot of people are retiring and there's not a lot of people coming in to replace them.
Well, the average age of construction is 45 years old. That's scary. Mm-hmm. And the kids aren't coming into it, right? I mean, they're going, I want a YouTube channel or whatever. I mean, the trade schools are gone. I mean, Home Depot got so desperate, they're starting, to train people. They now have a training program, right? Because they know contractors, it's a problem.
Yep.
And so training, I mean, you can hire good people, and construction's not that hard to learn. You can hire good people and train them to be roofers or plumbers or whatever you're going to do. You can learn that trade. So make sure you find good people. But it's an exciting time to be around, I think, because the industry is definitely changing a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. The whole world's changing, and the need for construction companies isn't going anywhere. So lots of opportunities.
AI is not going to put your roof on anytime soon.
Yeah, not anytime soon. Maybe eventually.
Right, for sure.
All right, Paul. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. And again, everybody, we have the link to Paul's website in the description. If you need employees, he's the man to talk to.
Thanks. I appreciate having you, Chuck. It's been fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul.